Hi, everybody. I hope everybody is in fit form. They're doing okay. And we have a couple of questions. And we're always pleased to get as many questions as we can. So if you feel inclined, please send in some more. We need them on Thursday night. And it would be a delight to see what kind of questions that you might send in. I have one here from John Markey. At a previous, either at a seminar or at a Thursday night, I talked about a small box being used on this part of the head. That is the top of the head. And before the fontanelle is right about here, as you can see.
In the Jewish tradition?
In the Jewish tradition, of course. And this box, I suppose, John was alert at the time and thought, well, maybe I didn't explain that box very well. And I didn't because it wasn't the actual question. But it was in and around something that we were discussing at the time. This small box is used as a reference point and a devotional focus. And the purpose for that is really a little, I will say a little bit stranger or more complex, maybe it's a better way to put it, than normally is looked at in various books that you might read about how energy comes up into the system and anchors in the top of the head. In fact, you don't really very often even hear about anchoring at the top of the head. But as some of you can remember at some of the seminars that I've given, I've talked about the root center, and usually in terms of the Hindu and Buddhist background, but nonetheless, the root center being stimulated in a particular manner and sending energy all the way up through the chakras on the etheric level, all the way up to the top of the head and anchoring roughly in this general area. I also mentioned that the gonad center does the same thing. It blends with the root center and operates all the way upwards, either the front or the back, and anchors in this particular area. I also talked about the solar plexus doing exactly the same thing. And you get a clue as to why that box is there. When these three levels of engagement that are related to the personality, by the way, and its initial use of force to construct a form, a literal form, like my form is Ron Chapman, whatever it may be. Someone else's will be their name, and they put name tags on these things when you're born. Really, they put name tags on our physical form, right? But the energy that's streaming in is often, let's say, not fully expressing itself, but it affects every single center, from the root center of the gonad, the solar plexus, touches the heart center in a particular way relative to its capacity to open, the throat the same way with its capacity to open, and they do not open fully. This is a misconception that many come up with. oh, my throat is open, my heart is open, my brow is open, my crown is open, all of this sort of stuff. And it is stimulated, not fully open. If it were fully open, that would be in our present state of development, it would be exceedingly difficult for us to handle this. We would, for example, not be able to function, period. We might be engaged in some state of bliss and not be able to handle walking across the street. Eating would not be that interesting. So on these levels, we have the developmental relationships with these chakras and these particular methods that are unknown to us, or yet certainly we attempt to try to understand them. One of them is the blending, the coming together of these three centers, which have affected all of the other centers in that area, in the crown area, in the crown center area. This whole area, it feels like a swirl as opposed to a box. But the box was a very brilliant method of bringing attention to something. In various times during any, let's say, capacity that a person might have who is quite reasonably well developed for our species, that energy would be perceived consciously by them, and they would begin slowly then to have broader external perceptions, broader internal perceptions of what we might talk about in terms of clairvoyance, clairaudience, clairsentience, prophecy, all kinds of things of that nature. And I'm not talking jumping to conclusions about anything. They would be perceiving it internally, understanding what was there, considering whether it might be of value to express anything about what they're perceiving, because they're perceiving it not to further their personality's recognition, but as an understanding of something that may not be well understood by all the rest of us. That would be a place where the personality was beginning to let go of its necessity to be important in the eyes of others. This is a tremendous thing, these three levels linking and blending through all the other Sephiroth or chakras or valves, if you want to call them that, depending on how you look at things. In having this occur, it is a precursor to beginning to lose interest in the dialogue that needs to be expressed on a daily basis so that others recognize that you exist and that existence is of some value, whatever you might want it to be. This is why this is not well recorded, well defined, because people always jump to conclusions about how able they are. You can't blame them for doing that. This is the nature of how we function on these planes. because we are trained from the time of our birth to engage with the cultivation of a value that is placed somehow, positive or negative, on our personalized version of expression we call personality. If there is a consistent focus, for example, on such a thing, it will stimulate activity in the top of the head. However, that then will stimulate activity in the root center, the gonad center, and the solar plexus, which is our core level where we get energy to construct in our daily life, construct whatever it is you want to do or not do. It's where that intensity comes from. In looking at that, we have no way to measure a value placed upon intensity, because intensity is different for all of us. For example, one could say, if you have a tremendous amount of flow or intensity coming into you, that you are basically very profoundly growing. And it could be true. However, if it was coming in a different way, softer manner, you could watch it easier instead of, if it was coming in strong, attempt to be surviving it. It's just a very different kind of way of looking at things. And then, of course, there's a method of personality, a method of acting in a certain way to prove that you must be truly spiritual. And this is related to a level internally that really exemplifies how all of us were trained to make a space, to make sure that other people thought we were okay, to be liked by other people, this kind of stuff. And there are tremendous amounts of counter propositions to this particular concept, but certainly not in the West, that's for sure. Not too many. In the East, if you were really able, you have to act more humble. Now that's a kind of categorization that relates to an Eastern orientation. Ours, you have to act in a certain other kind of way to be considered more able. These things are cultural. These don't have anything to do with growing. You often heard me tell this story, probably too often, about that gentleman that I met in 1986, who was profoundly able, and he was not interested in recognition. So when people came by that tried to be humble in front of him and think that he might be worthy in some way, he would take his sandal and he would take the dirt off of the sandal and kind of push it towards other people. It wasn't because he was a bad person. It was because he didn't want anybody to recognize his capability, even if they were guessing. It happened to be in an area where a lot of so-called spiritual folks were around there, based on the principle of, wearing clothes that way and all the rest of it, which is normal, natural in a certain level of engagement, all of us, perhaps. Um, he just didn't need that, didn't want that. He had come to grips with not necessarily being dependent on other people's view of him. This is a rare commodity, one could say. Of course, I don't mean to put down anybody who has reached that level of function at this particular point, and because if you were offended by what I just said, it would mean that you hadn't. None of us do well with these things, but nonetheless, this box was a concentration point and is a concentration point. Same as the idea that comes after this box. The idea that comes after is that this system that we have modulates, links up with the higher state, and blends. And at the same time, certainly initially, your personality pushes forward and the higher state helps it to soften down a bit, and it wants to take credit for that higher state definition within itself, and then it softens that down a bit, and over not only years but perhaps lifetimes, as some have mentioned, slowly it becomes rather okay. As a matter of fact, it doesn't go from here to being not okay and then here, now it's okay. It doesn't do that. It's more like in the blend, there's a recognition that it is occurring within the individual and they have no interest in having it any other way, that blend. Because suddenly they are not primary. They're functional. They're like a tool. And the higher state is prominent within them, enabling them to function in a manner that relates to a context, a second, a moment, for the aid of another relative to their inner growing or anything else that might come up relative to the help of that other person. And the individual then consciously is able to perceive that she or he have nothing to do with the occurrence at all, except they are there, they're watching, they're growing, they're noticing, and that's it. And they're attempting to understand. And even at that, within the mind, that higher state helps with hints about what that might mean, what this might mean, or statements, or dialogue. Now, if there's too much dialogue at our level, we are looked at as if we have no business being on the streets. And you can understand why that is so pertinent in our relationship with where we are and how we function in life. You need a sense of humor in this because the realization that something can be happening inside hasn't got anything to do with the value of the personality's look at itself. It has only to do with the situational engagement that energy, for example, can operate through an individual for the purpose of helping others. And in doing that, they are in themselves helped as well. So this was a very important thing, and still is for many. And I'm reticent to say this, but I will. Uh, there are some that have experienced in previous lifetimes the ability to engage with that higher state to some degree or to a large degree. And they enter into these planes for the purpose of being helpful in cultivating, helping others to gain access to a form within that can be also linked with those higher states for a purpose that relates directly to the healing of these states, or the helping, another way to put it, of these states to gain access to a broader understanding that they are than what they are normally uh, wishing to have. Proofs on these things are uh, just not there, because by the nature of it, no very able person would ever want to come forward as being extremely helpful to humanity. Uh, we have history about all of that, and we are still self-focused enough not to be able to perceive what's going on in another, but we digest what we believe is going on in another on a fairly surface level, but it's getting deeper. Psychology and philosophy has helped a bit, and uh, there is a rendering, at least in terms of what appears to be, in terms of our nervous system and our physical, emotional, and mental systems. Uh, and we're trying to be helpful in that department because that's where we can be. It's what's open to us. I believe that other levels will begin to be more open to us. And because if they're there, we should continue to grow. And for all of you who are out there who believe that we're already perfectly well developed in all that we understand, I could only say that it's somewhat similar to this engagement with these three very valuable centers in our early going of our so-called personality development. And these three centers, if they can link up to the top of the head, which they do not always do in most of us, if they can, and you can be aware of it, then you will begin slowly not to be interested in telling the world how great you are. But there is a remnant related to that. And it is very, very important in our world as it is. And that remnant is called the form we use, the personality we have that helps us to survive on these planes. So there must be a balance so that higher states can operate right at these levels, and your personality can function at these levels at the same time, relative to the need at the time. Something like that. So this box that they actually wear a small little cardboard or material box right here has of value. It seems kind of funny on the street if you're around a Hasidic background community to see these boxes there, but they may be walking by you and praying with their focus here. And remember that if that energy is up there, then you can begin to move it around. Move it around, meaning increase its flow by your attention to it, because that means you're not going to be too freaked out by suddenly it's appearing. The dilemma with all of this stuff that relates to awareness, if awareness is truly there, it's unsettling to some degree because you don't know what's going to happen next, and you don't want to be without it once you're used to it. It's not about you see a person, you align with that person somehow, and therefore you like them, therefore they have good energy. It's not that kind of thing. I hope we will let that kind of stuff go eventually. But on a rudimentary level, even the idea of wanting, the sincerity of wanting to grow beyond wherever you are now, doesn't matter, is a really important thing, because that is a focus on an honesty within, not a cultivation. It's a focus. Sincere. You can't fool that higher state. But it will play out almost anything to help you understand that anything may not be exactly what might be helpful. Often when you get something that's really helpful, strangely enough, you end up not doing it as often because the personality anticipates that there might be a change in it if it continues to do what it's doing. Others do it a different way, and then they begin to have experiences, and sometimes the experiences will make them nervous. You can't blame them for that. It's different. Some of the internal growing makes you feel different than you have ever been before. And it does not validate the personality. It helps it to shift beyond what it's normally used to. And this is very complex. It's not simplistic. But in the meantime, we have to use whatever simplicity that we can come up with that makes us feel comfortable. Now I've said that. Now I'm going to say something else. And it may be very complex, your simplicity. And it's okay. Do what you can. Be how you can. Let you be aware of how you are the best you can. Try not to judge anything within, because the intensity will go to that judgment. You'll get so good at it, you won't even notice you're doing it. If you begin to act out, you'll get good at that. If you begin to do something else, you'll get good at that. Find some kind of a balance someplace, because that energy is constantly on the lookout to help you see how you are. So if you don't want to see how you are, you want it only to be in a certain way, it will help you out with that. It is a very loving energy. not see the definition like that because we ask questions that are very strange. Why does that energy let this happen, that happen? Because it's really attempting to help something within us to perceive it, to learn beyond each and every ripple level of expansion that can occur as we relate to life. And this is not so easy. There is much that we don't understand while thinking we understand much. I think this is valuable for us where we are because it reassures us that we're okay. It takes a lot of courage to focus on an area that may change how you engage with life or increase how you engage with life to show you what's going on inside. So even we can look at it and say, I don't really want to do that, but I don't know what else to do. Because mainly that is the line that we all are a part of. We only know how to do us the way we have been doing us or cultivate ourselves to be. And we do that, in all honesty, in every second, the best we can. Even if it looks to other people like it's not very good. Now, that is a strange thing. There was another question that was which fits into this one, by the way, ultimately, that John asked, please talk to us about our rainbow light bodies, about a sense of eternity. I'm not sure about the eternity part, but the light body part, I'll give it a shot. I wrote a little bit here, but let me try and talk a little bit about it. This light body is, there have been Buddhist books written about it, and some Hindu highly able beings have recognized that it does exist. It's a situation where there is no longer a relationship that is personified within the being. You heard me right. Each and every cell at the time when they are leaving these planes where the body can no longer handle being here, the emotions are, they're ready, their mind is ready. It's gone through a tremendous level of engagement with higher states. And the individual has functioned here, relatively speaking, in accordance with that higher state. And I don't mean just getting directives. I'm talking about they are literally in relationship with the higher state, like hours and hours of meditation, and they can handle that. We don't handle hours of meditation. If you're working, for example, and you're meditating 5 or 6 hours a day, chances are you will finish off. You cannot do your job because of what happens in your emotional disposition and within the mind. The body ceases to want to get up and move. The body just wants to get into a position where it can meditate. I'm not talking about meditating an hour or two or whatever. I'm talking about engaging in a level where the cells in your body are tremendously engaging in a certain manner so that you are not moving. And their oscillation is relative to another state. Your emotional disposition is not responding. It's in a balanced state. And I mean a balanced state, not a personality balanced state. Neither active nor non-active as a response. None, no response. Almost like you're in a trance state. Almost, because there's activity within that trance state, but nonetheless. Almost. And the mind activity of the personality is non-existent. Non-existent does not exist. But the function of your being can get up, move around, but the higher state is in charge or control of that form. And when you are ready to pass on to another state, the higher state, in a certain fashion, instigates a removal of every cell, physical and your emotional mental systems are gone. Already they've been equipped to leave. The physical body then is all that's kind of left of the personality state, and it begins to whir in a certain manner that instigates an absorption of that physical form into nothing. And there are ripples from that, frequency ripples that they often name the rainbow body. It's really not, it's a rainbow light bodies. At the release of that beingness, really is a misnomer. It's really just a glowing form of various colors. I have not seen that, so I can't tell you what those colors are. But they say it's rainbows. And you can go and look this up, and they will give you there's all kinds of definitions. I'm just trying to give you an idea of what goes on. And no personalization is in that form. And then that form is reabsorbed. It's almost as if it becomes invisible to these planes. And it's released the same way as your mind and your emotional dispositional construct is. And in that release, there is a reflex reaction that relates to being what they call a rainbow light in the proximity of the individual involved. And then it's gone. These things are honestly way beyond our imagination, certainly beyond our average capacity to even consider viable. We have a great technique that we've used. It's called the tongue. We speak about a whole lot of things, and we think we know stuff. We don't know very much about this, but one person who was supposed to have gone through this was Milarepa in a fairly long time ago, and others have been considered. In other words, all that's left is some hair and some nails, this kind of thing. I don't know why hair and nails are left. It doesn't make any sense to me, but nonetheless, I think it's a metaphor for nothing of value is left. Nothing that we consider on these planes valuable is left at all. Now, don't get confused with the idea of leaving these planes and working on other planes, because that is not the same thing. Not to say that that being would not work on other planes, or could. That being could return to these planes to be helpful to these planes as well. That is also within that construct of possibility, depending on beliefs that you may have. Not the individual's beliefs, our beliefs about how that should be or shouldn't be. I hope that helps, John. It's not always easy to answer either one of these questions. About the sense of eternity, one thing I can say that when we're engaging with things that are so different than how we have actually experienced them, or anything, period, sometimes we think those things are tremendously, profoundly powerful. It could be, and there's a rendering, a whole bunch of things that can happen. They are just preparation for something just beyond what we can handle. And that helps us to be able to handle something that is coming down the line that may be very helpful in our internal development. So everything would feel like as if it's eternal. For example, you can gain access to a level of peace, loving like crazy. And that level of loving we would consider, and probably the experience itself would allow us to deeply recognize that there are things that are much beyond our experience. But those levels of experience would make us wonder whether that was eternity or how eternity must be. The blending of tremendous sense of inner experience with a coarser experience. For example, if you had that kind of experience, there would be moments when you could not relate to the coarser. You'd be too busy attempting to be inside that peacefulness. And every attempt you made would pull you away from it. Excuse me. In that statement, I don't mean you drive yourself away from it because you made some kind of move to be valued and important or whatever. It could be anything. But in fact, there's a reflex inside the personality, a natural one, that attempts to help that personality to maintain itself because that's where it feels more comfortable. Right in that place, if that kind of internal peacefulness, occurred, it would be like there was a spreading of the personality away from it, and it would be there and you would be in it. You would be quiet mentally, emotionally. You would just be in it and physically. And you would be there and it would be in you and you'd be in it. If something happened on the outside around you, your automatic system would incur a ripple, would express a ripple of expression of some kind. And then you would be the one that would be pulling you out of that peaceful place. But a remnant would be there. It would affect you, no matter what you thought it would be. Your understanding would probably not be exactly true, but it would be your understanding. So therefore you would lean on that to make sense of things, which is what we do most often in our lives. So if that makes any sense, it gives you at least an idea of how these things may occur. And looking at it from that point of view, you realize that the softening, or first of all, the recognition, the perception, the actual knowing of you is not meant to be a judgment of you. It's meant to be a recognition of how you function so that you might support the movement of that into a more, let's say, a different manner, a different way. And within 1 second, if you thought that, energy would occur to come in and help you do that for a second or two. It does not miss any opportunity that you make available to it. And you made it available to it because you were in a second or two less vulnerable. Therefore, that flow could operate in and help you to be less vulnerable under certain conditions. But it doesn't mean it would not help you also to retain the way you were before, because that's an automatic. That you're practiced in this. You would be quite capable of restraining yourself from inner real growth, and very capable of constructing a formula that you might call real growth. That's not a negative. That provokes a broader understanding of how we actually function here on these planes. And it may stimulate a resolve and an understanding that that resolve will be, to some degree, taking place. It will cause something to occur, but at the same time, little by little, because you want to maintain a sense of fitness in the personality realm. So I hope this helped a little bit. It's a very complex question. Simple, it looks simple, and it's basically very complex. So you can understand why certain practices can be helpful, and why certain practices that are helpful are not used, because they effect change. So I wish you all a very, very good evening. We're now going to meditate, and we'll probably meditate for roughly about 50 minutes to an hour. And please take care of yourselves. And we'll talk to you later. Bye for now. Don't forget some of those questions, please. I'll do the best I can with them. And now we'll just begin to do the balancing and the grounding. Take your time, do it on your own. Good night, everybody.